Chapter 5. The inside of Asher's kitchen is filled with smoke. Lucille, Asher curses, feeling his translation spell flicker under the weight of an untranslatable word. He tosses the rope he was holding aside, heaves the oven door open, and steps back as a cloud of black smoke fills the air. Luckily, he had bred his tree to be pretty resistant to fire. Stepping over to the sink, he turns the water on and holds a hot hand under it, turning it to a thick cloud of steam. He can hear Darius coughing, and as he looks, he can barely make out the human collapsing onto all fours, pulling his shirt over his nose and mouth. Sighing, letting the steam quell whatever heat was left in the oven, Asher trots over to Darius and drags him by the back of his coat into the hallway, growing a bit more muscle to accomplish that. Ugh, Darius says, stumbling to his feet and away from the smoking kitchen and up against the opposite wall. What the hell were you even trying to make, anyway? Asher huffs. It was a cake, he says, and I got interrupted by you. He shoots a glare at Darius, who gives him a hostile look back. Now that Asher's been reminded of what he had been doing before, his hunger returns with full force, pinching every nerve in his abdomen as it drives him to eat. Well, I couldn't exactly decide when I'd be returning to you, Darius huffs, considering the fact that I was seconds away from death. He gestures to his neck, then flinches as his hand grazes his neck. Upon closer inspection, Asher can see a reddish patch on the side of Darius's neck, probably a friction burn. Asher can understand the logic of that, but his hunger can't. He watches, teeth bared, as Darius heads past him and leans over to peek into the kitchen, which, by now, is almost cleared of smoke, thanks to the open balcony just beside the end of one of the counters. Still, soot covers the ceiling and the whole room reeks of fire. And it looks like you already got something to eat, Darius says, gesturing toward the many utensils strewn about the counters and the dining table. A lot of somethings. The hunger forces its way up Asher's throat, driving him to part his jaws. It wants him to bite and swallow. His throat twitches in anticipation, but there's nothing in there to eat. Nothing except Darius. I need a lot, he says, his voice coming out as a growl. He paces toward Darius, his skin prickling as he closes in. Damn it, he has to get those nerves turned off, get this whole thing under control. But what flesh wants, flesh gets. He grabs Darius's arm, feeling the tips of his fingers grow numb with how tightly he's holding on. Darius cries out in pain, stumbling back, but Asher's body moves with him. The two of them lock eyes, and the prey-like fear in Darius's deep brown eyes only spurs Asher on more. Christ, Darius huffs, which stings Asher's ears. You're not actually gonna eat me because I ruined your stupid cake, right? Asher's jaws part around Darius's arm. His flesh is gonna taste so good. Metallic, savory, human. He can feel it beneath his teeth already. The heat radiates from Darius's body, even as the larger man shivers, tries to drag himself back, as the muscles in his arm flex. And something's in Asher's mouth. Asher bites down as hard as he can, and that was not the texture he was expecting. It's hard, giving only slightly under his teeth, and he can feel fibers of it, and it's got a sweet aftertaste. He peers down to see the wooden handle of a spoon sticking out from his mouth. Sucking on the end of the spoon, which still has a bit of batter on it, he looks up at Darius, whose fear is now tempered. Slowly, he feels Darius wrenching his arm free, and his hunger is okay with that. It's preoccupied with what's in his mouth. Obviously, he can't swallow it like this, but maybe he can shapeshift to fit it in his throat. But before he can even try, Darius spins around and digs in the cupboard above him. He tosses Asher a burlap bag, and Asher opens it to find a mixture of nuts inside, his favorite for adding to fruitcakes, but he supposes it'll serve a different purpose now. He spits out the spoon, letting it clatter to the floor, and digs in the bag for a large nut to pop in his mouth. Once he's chewing, his sensibilities come back quickly, and his body starts to ache from the strain. He sighs, glancing up at Darius, who grips the counter behind himself as he gazes down at Asher. Good call, Asher says before swallowing. You're a lucky one, aren't you? Only facing my hunger in the kitchen where there's plenty of things to distract it. Darius swallows thickly. Yeah, lucky. Asher smiles, He can see the hesitancy in Darius's features, and he knows, deep down, he'll now be able to get rid of him for good. He didn't plan this, but it's turning out for him. Even if he still has to clean up his kitchen, he'll have plenty of time to do that once he's alone. "All right," Asher says, turning away. "Come follow me. We'll discuss your options." Still taking bits from the bag to munch on, Asher leads Darius away slowly, meandering toward the hall until the human can work up enough bravery to follow him. They head down the curved hallway, past a few basements, to a spiral ramp, which leads up to the next floor. After passing a few hobby-oriented rooms, gotta have somewhere to fit those Grecian looms and Georgian stone molders, they get to Asher's magic room, the very same one that he had sent Darius away from. Darius stops at the door. "Oh, hell no," he says. "What?" Asher asks, glancing back at him. "I'm not going in there again," Darius says. Asher sighs. "What now?" "Why not?" he asks, setting his hands on his hips, the nuts in the bag clattering as he swings it. "I'm not letting you put me back there," Darius says. "Asher, I'll be killed. I know you don't really have a good grasp on what death means, but for me, it'd be the end of everything, for good." Asher rolls his eyes. He does know a thing or two about death and what it can do, but he can't let his mind get lost in that right now. "I'm not going to send you back there," he says. "We're going to go over some different options, and then you're going to send me away without my permission again," Darius says. Asher frowns. "Fine," he says. "Where would you rather have this discussion? The parlor? The TV room? The other parlor? The archives? The other parlor?" Darius blinks a couple times, then shakes his head. "Anywhere," he says. "Anywhere but here." Asher lifts his hand, trying to think of the worst place he could open a portal to. "Put that hand down," Darius says. "Anywhere in this tree." Asher sighs. "Fine, fine," he says, turning around again. He heads down the hall to the next doorway, then heads inside. Thankfully, Darius follows him into his magic supply room, where dozens and dozens of wooden and metal boxes line the walls, each of them just barely reachable to access their contents. Asher slides the top onto an open wooden box of day blossom petals and sits down on it, then gestures for Darius to sit across the way, on top of a box of dried sea snail egg sacs. Darius eases himself up onto it, not paying any mind to the contents, which Asher finds a bit funny. There could be anything in there, and Darius would be none the wiser. "Like I said," Asher begins, "I'm not going to send you back there. But I could send you back to a version of there. A different time and place, maybe. Or maybe a timeline where you had never gone after that person." Darius looks uneasy. "What do you mean by that?" Asher huffs. Another human he has to walk through time travel, like a mother holding her baby's hands as it walks. "A different place," he says, "instead of... Where were you?" Darius thinks. "Louisiana," he says. "A different place," Asher says again. "A different place than Louisiana, but the same time. Maybe, I don't know, Michigan, Guatemala, Futatoro. I'd move you along the third dimension." He watches Darius, who seems to be following. "Or," Asher continues, "I could send you to a different time, the same place, but after those people are gone. Or before. Or 1,000 years in the future, or a million into the past." Darius pales, his eyes gazing somewhere beyond Asher. "That would be the fourth dimension," Asher explains. "Most humans can only move one direction through the fourth dimension. Forward through time." He closes his eyes. "Or I could send you to a different timeline," he says slowly. "When you move forward through time, you imagine it as a line, a sequence of unbroken happenings, connected one to the other endlessly. But that is just one direction. When you make a decision, you cannot step backwards through time to remake it, or sideways to see how the other option would have turned out. But in the fifth dimension, you can. When you, or anyone else, makes a decision, the timeline splits. In the bigger picture, time is not a singular line, but an ever-growing structure, reaching out its timelines like the branches of this tree reach to the sun. Everything is a decision. The decision you made to come here, to say everything that you said to me, to follow me inside, to object to following me into my magic room. Every little change and inflection and every little twitch of your muscles all culminates in the very timeline that you're living, that you're hurtling through with no control, that we're subject to and that we call our home. As these decisions add, they create worlds entirely unfamiliar to us. Even Ana, the planet that I call home, was once the same as your Earth, just given an incomprehensible amount of changes, through an incomprehensible amount of differing decisions, and left to simmer for a few more billion years. And that is the highest dimension that I can travel through. That is the fifth dimension. Asher opens his eyes to see Darius staring at him. The two of them sit in silence for some time, during which Asher wonders if Darius has still retained the ability to speak. Okay, Darius finally says. Just imagine it, Asher continues, eager to fill the silence, eager to get to being by himself again. Any world you can think of, we can find a timeline for it. You want a world untouched by the ravages of war? A world where you'll never go hungry? A world where people treat you like a king? Where no one stands up to you? Where you'll never have to work a day in your life? I can take you there. I'm not going to drop you where you were. I'm going to put you wherever you want. Do you understand? Darius nods quickly, furrowing his brow as he fixes Asher with a strange gaze. Okay, Asher says. Now, where do you want to go? End of chapter 5.